Hey, it's Elizabeth D'Alto, and this is the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untame the Wild Soul is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. What's up, wild ones? Welcome to episode number 185 of the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth D'Alto. And real quick, before I introduce you to today's guest, at the end of this episode, I gave you the wrong episode number in the show notes. This is episode number 185, not 184. So if you want to check out the show notes for today, go to untameyourself.com/episode-184. I'd actually recorded this interview before I had the idea to start Sunday sermons. So now that we're doing those, that changed some of the episode numbers. And if you haven't yet checked out our Sunday sermons, we have two of them that are up. They're episodes number 182 and 184. And Sunday sermons are basically little morsels of wild and untamed gospel, heart ponderings, and wisdom to spark your own truth, power, and love from my wild soul to yours. So they're shorter. They're like 10, 15 minutes. Super great going into your week. So check those out. And now for today's episode, we have Sarah Nannen with us. Sarah is the author of a recent book called Unveiled. And so that's what we're talking about. I've been looking forward to having her on the show since the idea for her book was just a seedling. I remember being on the phone with her and saying that she had to message me as soon as it was ready to be alive in the world so we could talk about it here on the show. Grief is a deeply personal, intimate, and tender topic, and it's not really something that any of us escape from dealing with in some way, shape, or form. Sarah comes from a place of wanting to rebel against grief as we know it. She is a veteran and a military widow with 4 children who found herself seeking a solution that didn't exist when her late husband passed. Her perspective on grief is that it doesn't have to only be about survival or stress management, and that it's entirely possible to create a thriving life without dishonoring or disrespecting anyone's memory. This is what she's done, and in today's episode, she's sharing her story, her experience, and how she now helps other widows through the experience as well. It's a fascinating and delicate conversation, and if you're currently grieving anything or anyone in your life right now, please be extra gentle with yourself as you listen and stay close to your own heart. Let's get into it. Oh my God, I'm so excited for today's guest. We have a beautiful story of how we met, which we'll tell you about in a moment. But Sarah, I have to ask you our first question we ask all of our women first, which is, what do you love about being a woman?
I have been waiting so long for you to ask me that question. Listening to all your podcasts forever, I always wondered what my answer would be. And in this exact moment, it is sisterhood and the nourishment that comes from that. And that is something that I did not discover until less than 5 years ago did I really understand what that meant. And it is so juicy and powerful, and a thing that just feeds my soul in a way that I just can't imagine not having now.
And how did you discover it?
Through having babies, actually. I was introduced to that whole way of being with other women by hiring a doula, by inviting my best friends to come to my births when my late husband was overseas deployed, and then coming to theirs and becoming a doula and attending other women's births and holding sacred circles and holding, childbirth education classes. And it just evolved into this awareness of we are amazing together, and why don't we do more of this?
Yeah. So, oh, that's so amazing, because it's something that this year in particular, I've been super craving, because I feel like there are different categories of my life where I have some sisters here, some sisters here. Sometimes there's overlap, sometimes there's not. But this craving for a universal community for anything. So super interesting. Do you find that as well? Or do you have different circles for different things, or?
I have different circles in different places.
Yeah.
So having been a military spouse, I lived a lot of different places. And so there's sisters from this part of the world, and there's sisters from my Japan story, and there's sisters now here that I've discovered. And then, I have 2 best friends who we text every day, but when none of us live together. So
right.
I think there's different pots of people in different places from different parts of my story.
Yeah. And how often do you see your best friends?
We get together once a year for sure. We schedule an annual trip somewhere amazing and sit for a long weekend together and talk about all the things. But it's so infrequent. It's insane how connected we feel just because we stay on the up and up through technology and text messages and sending pictures and love letters and, oh my God, freak out moments. And we just hold space that way. So
it's super cool. I that's something I say all the time. Sometimes technology can be complex and create the illusion of connectivity where really it's just keeping people separate, like behind our own computers in our own homes. But with certain people, it really is. Are you familiar with the app Voxer?
Yes.
Voxer is my favorite freaking thing because there's something so playful about like hitting that walkie-talkie button and like feeling like I'm walkie-talkieing my friends. I've literally deepened probably half a dozen friendships this year because Voxer exists. And it's just like every day, all throughout the day, like 3 or 4 messages, whereas I wouldn't have had those conversations with people because it's not like we're picking up the phone to talk to each other.
Right. But how funny that seems like such an impossible thing to do, to pick up the phone to talk to each other. Like, I can just voice message you this and we're going to have the same conversation. It's just going to be disjunctured over the course of 4 days. It's so funny how we don't.
Well, because too, like the timing, right? Like when an idea strikes or when something comes up, I'm like, oh, I must tell this to this person now, and then they can listen to it. But it's also really funny to me how particular we are, because I do have friends who like literally will not pick up the phone. They'll be like, just text me, and I'll be like, no, this will take 2 seconds, you know? Meanwhile, I hate voice text on the iPhone. Because with Voxer, you can go forwards and backwards. Yeah. And you could speed it up. So, like, I have my friends who, like, they get, like, 3 times sped up, 2 times sped up. You know, some people, I could listen to them at just, like, the regular pace. So, yeah. But all that in the name of connection, right?
For sure. And that helps with all of us. We all have kids. And so it's hard to have a phone call because it sounds like someone has, like, schizophrenia in the background or, like, Tourette's. Like, I swear this is normal. No one's dying. We're just having dinner here. But it sounds like Armageddon's happening.
I'm imagining it's like, blah, 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 blah. No. Don't touch that. Get off of that. I got to go.
Yeah, for sure. And then, like, requiring none of us to apologize for it.
Of course.
Like, we automatically, like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, this is just real life. I get it. It's not my fire that's happening. So carry on.
Yeah. My friend Lori Kennedy, who I have to have on the podcast, wrote this amazing post. And she has 2 kids. I know you have 4, right? 4?
Yeah, I have 4.
She wrote this post about how she went to pick up her daughter from a play date, and she ate dinner there, and the mom was like apologizing for her messy kitchen. She's like, you fed my child. Like, please do not apologize for your messy kitchen. It's actually not even that messy. Right.
Like, you cooked in it. You are absolved from having mess.
You're good. My child is happy. She had a good time. She ate. Like, you've nothing to apologize for.
That's what we do, though. We're so programmed to apologize for realness.
Yeah. So speaking of realness, I'm the reason. First of all, let's tell them the story of how we met. You tell it from your perspective, because I know I've actually written about it online before. What was it like for you?
So I'm in California, in San Diego, with one of my best friends having breakfast at our favorite restaurant, Naked Cafe. And I'm sitting there and I see you walk in. I'm like, Susan, Elizabeth Yalto's here. And she's like, wait, is that the podcast you listen to all the time? I'm like, yeah, she's here. Like, in real, it's her. She's having breakfast. It was such a hilarious celebrity moment because I feel like I know you because that's what podcasts do.
Yeah,
I've driven to Chicago thousands of times with you and painted my house with you and
my God, I love that.
Right? So I'm like, should I say something? I have to say something. She's here. We're supposed to meet. I need to talk to her.
Wait, let me interrupt for a second because I saw your face. I was like, I must know this person because like you just like looked up and I'm like searching the bowels of my brain for like, where have I met this person before? Because there was just this like recognition in your face. And I was like, I must know this person. Yeah. And I was like, maybe she's just really nice.
I think that's the magic of podcasting is I feel like I know you because you've shared so much of your thoughts and beliefs and stories and life with me, right? So you don't know who I am, but I'm like, I know this person. So then Susan's like, maybe just play it cool and let her order her food first. She's like, I mean, you could totally talk to her, but she should like sit first. Maybe just don't run. So I'm like, all right, we're just going to finish breakfast and play it cool. And I'm going to pretend I'm not glancing at her. Like she's so normal. She's just sitting at a table, writing in a book and like ordering food like a human does. So great. It was like definitely a celebrity geek out moment, which is great. And then I just, at the end, I'm like, okay, I'm going. I'm making my move. I'm just going to go say hi and not be weird. And then I said a bunch of words at you and you were like, hi, I don't know you.
Oh my God.
And then you like, then I told you my story and you heard it and it was great. Like it was just so cool to just say hi and meet you in person and see the human Elizabeth Yalto having breakfast. Oh my God.
It was so cool because from my end of things, I left my house that morning wanting to go somewhere I hadn't been before. Mm-hmm. And so I drove to this area called Rancho Santa Fe, which is like a bit inland from where I ended up with you. And I was looking for like the spot where I wanted to have breakfast. It was a Sunday morning and I was like, really wanted some sacred time. And I went all the way to this town and I was like, there's nothing here. So I just like got in my car and I drove back. And I don't remember if I had been to that location of Naked Cafe before, but I had lived in Carlsbad and I had been to another one and I knew I loved it. I knew what I liked on the menu. So I'm like, whatever, I'll just go here. It's right by the beach. And what's really funny is actually before I even came in Naked Cafe, I went into one more little place that I'd never been in before because I really wanted to go somewhere I'd never been before. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, whatever. So I go into Naked Cafe and then I see you. And then when you shared your story, I was like, oh my God, like I had to land in this place. So I normally don't ask people that general, tell us your story question on the show, but you do have an incredible story that we do need for context to have the rest of our conversation. So, it doesn't even matter if you remember exactly what you shared with me that morning, but what's the crux of your story?
Yeah. So my story that I know the part of my story you're asking me about is how I became to be a grief coach and educator and advocate. And long story short is I was living in Japan on a military base and my husband was away at training. And while he was away, 6 weeks after I had our fourth baby by myself in Japan, he died in an aviation accident. And that just set in motion this rapid transition. Within 5 days, I was back stateside with 13 suitcases and 4 babies living in my parents' house, planning funeral.
I didn't ask you about this that day, but like, how does one even do that?
Superhuman strength and an amazing community of people. Like 24 hours after it happened, my mom arrived in Japan. She does what moms do, that she swooped in and was like, I am dysfunctional, but I'm here and I will do whatever I can to, like, we're all just unhinged.
Yeah.
I had an amazing neighbor who swooped in and took charge. I'm like, I can only do the minimum of whatever has to be done, and anything more than that, I don't want to know about. So just tell me what has to be done. Meanwhile, neighbors were taking my kids to the park and to school and bathing them and putting them to bed. And I was planning memorials and like sending someone on an emergency trip to get my daughter a passport. She didn't have a passport. So like we couldn't even leave the country with her until they went to the embassy and like filed like there were so many logistics that the military, the people who were assigned to us to help us helped out with. But it was just like all these things. Like I am trying to grasp the fact that someone just told me that I have a dead husband. But instead of that, I have to figure out when I'm leaving and how I'm leaving and if I'm taking everything. Am I moving now or I'm going to wait till later? Like how does this happen?
It's not like you can just like hop back over to Japan real quick to get your stuff.
Right. There were just so many logistics. So we had an amazing community. That's one of the special like tribes that you get in a military world is you put out an SOS to the base that we need suitcases. Like we don't have enough suitcases to do this. And then like suitcases arrived on the front porch. Like people, so it's an amazing thing to be part of that type of community who knows how to respond and take care of you. But it was just sort of like brute strength and some amazing humans who were willing to come toward me inside of that insanity and say, what can my hands do to help make this happen? Yeah. So my dad arrived the next day. We flew back. So my 4, myself, my 2 parents, and then we were assigned a military escort person to come with us. And so we had like one-on-one man-to-man defense on the airplane. And you just do it. You just do the next thing next. And you go into this survival mode. And you keep thinking when you get to the funeral, like everything will calm down and like you'll figure things out. But like that's just when that's when the insanity of the logistics ends and the beginning of the grief starts. Yeah. And so then it was, wow, now I am a displaced human without my community because I just moved across the ocean back to my parents' house, by the way. So hello, childhood, everything that comes back with that too, right?
Yeah.
And I have a newborn and I'm postpartum and like all of these things just like start landing and you're like, what will become of me?
Yeah.
And so I went into this with, a yoga practice for 10 years and a childbirth educator and a doula. And so I had these tools in my hip pocket for like observing my thoughts and understanding what I was feeling and knowing that there's this status quo of like the way we believe things are. So I like to use a birth example. Like I went into my first birth thinking it will be scary and dangerous and horrifying because that's what everyone always kind of told me it was going to be. People, Hollywood, whatever. And then I found this amazing yoga teacher and childbirth educator who said like, hey, it could be other things. And I'm like, I don't believe you, but like, I want to drink that Kool-Aid. So what class is that? And then I did that thing and found that birth doesn't have to be terrifying and dangerous. And like it can be, but it's not inherently those things. Yeah. And so I sort of was applying that same thought process already to my grief. Like this is terrifying and I feel really small and really disempowered. And I know some of that's because of what I believe it means about me to be a widow at 35 and have 4 kids. I guess I was 32 then. But also just like that was sort of what was offered to me. The support was like my family swooped in and started doing things for me, which was amazing and I needed then. But it also sort of like was disempowering in a way. So it was like navigating this route of like, how do I receive help from people, but also like eventually find my way to doing things for myself when everyone just believed like, I'm toast, you're done. There's nothing more now to do. Like your job for the rest of forever is to survive this, is to not hurt your children or screw them up too badly. Right. And like, don't get too fat, like don't lose yourself entirely in this and like really kind of spend your life sort of grieving and honoring your amazing late husband. And that felt really small. That option felt really small. The support that I was offered was everywhere, but it was survival strategies and coping skills and stress management. And no one was talking about, here's what life after loss can be. Here's another way of looking at it. Here's the inspirational speakers. Here's the stories of other amazing women who have gone through this shitstorm and like thrived eventually. Like, so it seemed like I had to choose. I could either just skip over the grief and pretend it was okay, or I was just supposed to stay there forever.
Interesting. So how did you find, I'm curious for when you were ready. First of all, when were you ready? And second of all, when you were, how did you go about finding the inspiration or the resources? Like, what does one Google? Or like, how do you do that,
Sure.
Which now people Google and they can find you. And I have another friend, Christina Rasmussen, who I think you might be familiar with her stuff. Yes. Like, I know there are some resources, but when you're in the place and you're like, what the hell? I don't want to do it the way everyone's trying to tell me it needs to be done. But so I'm just curious of like, what were the steps?
Sure. In the beginning, honestly, I was Googling, am I depressed or is this just normal grief? Like I was just like trying to get it right. How do I not screw this up? How do I not make myself sick? How do I know if I'm crazy or if I'm okay?
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it was just, there was so much like survival. Like I have to find a school and I have to find a house and I have to buy a car and I have to sign my kid up for a pediatrician and a soccer camp and like, just like making life. And I got to a point where, that was sort of done and like the semblance of a scraped together life was put back together again.
Yeah.
And then I got to the point where I'm like, there's gotta be something more than like surviving every day.
Yeah.
That just felt too small at some point. And so I went in search of, I did therapy because that's what you're supposed to do. Like you're grieving. So here's therapy, go to that for the rest of forever and hope that that will be enough. And it was useful in some regards, but there wasn't a lot of action involved.
Yeah.
It just was like, we were just talking about the same thing over and over. And I was giving her all the right answers because I'm really good at being a straight A student.
Yeah.
So what do I say to not make myself sound sick or bad or crazy? Here we go. And then my body got sick. And so I had to stop kind of faking the funk and like pretending myself into being okay and really pay attention to my healing journey. So I went to doctors and they told me I wasn't sick. I was just like, I needed anxiety medication probably because you have a dead husband and 4 kids. So what else would it be?
Yeah.
And, you know, there was nothing showed up and nothing showed up. And so I turned to yoga. I turned to meditation. I turned to Reiki and body work. And I went to the mountains by myself. Like I did empowering things like traveling by myself and just
How
like
did you do that with 4 kids?
Right? Asking for help, which is scary.
Yeah.
And healing that whole motherhood martyrdom thing where like I'm supposed to be here and want to be here. And like my kids will be totally okay if I call upon my in-laws and say, can I take this week to go to the mountains by myself and do this big thing that I have to do? So it's making space and it's claiming space.
Mm-hmm.
That was such a huge part of the healing journey was like, I am worth claiming space to do the work that it takes because I can't be a good mom if I don't.
Yeah.
Like just physically being here isn't enough for my kids. They deserve more. And if I can't heal, then I can't help them heal. And
Right. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. So about how long did it take? So it's been 3 years?
It's been 3.5 years. Yeah.
It's been 3.5 years. And so were you were in Japan and I know you were in the military as well yourself at one point, right? Were you working when you were in Japan? Like all the logistics I'm so curious about, like how did you make money?
Yeah.
Like what did you do? Like the putting your life back together stuff I'm so interested in. And I know this is something you help people with now. So I want to know like how you did it. And then I want to know like how you help other people, like where they start to put the pieces back together or
For
new
sure.
pieces. Maybe it's not even back together. Just keep talking.
Yeah. And I think that's the big key, right? I think a lot of what we do in grief is we try and put our life back together and we try and keep things the way that they were. And it's the whole metamorphosis thing. That's what's happening in grief. Like your husband dies and the world as you know it comes completely unraveled and you go with it. Like the person you were that was married to him unravels right alongside.
Yeah.
And we spend a long time typically trying to get her back. To be that person, to have life be that way. And we spend a lot of time thinking if only he wasn't gone, everything would be okay.
Right.
We spend a lot of time, Byron Katie calls it like arguing with reality and what happens when you stop arguing with reality. And we spend so much time in grief, ignoring the pain and what we can learn from that and arguing with reality and trying to overcome it and go back to being okay, go back to life the way we knew it. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Like no one can, we haven't figured out how to raise the dead and we can't go back in time.
Yeah. And so I want to pause for people listening because, Sarah's story is obviously specific to her, but I'm sure you can all, whether you've lost someone or not, have had an event or something that happened in your life after which nothing was ever possibly going to be the same for whatever reason. And I love this concept that person went with that experience. And so it's not about getting something back or putting something back together, but looking at what you have and going, okay, how does this work now?
And there's a piece of it that we find out we don't actually know who we are without that part of us.
Yeah.
Some of the women I support talk about feeling like they're 13-year-olds again, and people treat them like they're 13-year-olds. Like that's a time when you're not quite in touch with your intuition, but you're starting to hear it and you wrestle with like what's right and what's wrong. And everyone around you sort of treats you like you're an irrational, child who hasn't quite figured life out yet.
Yeah.
Like everyone wants to give you all the advice about what they know is the best thing for you. It's the same thing in grief. We apply this myth that, people who are deeply grieving are irrational humans. And it's not true. Like there is a piece of you that is lost and confused and searching, but you're still there, you still exist, and there's still you are able to make decisions. Yeah. So we're not doing anyone favors by the way we're showing up with them, because there's a lot of power that gets stripped away from people who are already feeling pretty powerless by the way that we interact with them and the things we presume and project onto them when they're grieving.
Say more about this, because this has come up in podcast discussions before. I'm all about my courageous conversations. And so this is something I've really thought about is what are the things that you say to people? And one of the reasons why grief in particular is because I said the wrong, like I know, that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
For sure.
It actually doesn't matter that we're all just trying to help. Like, if you don't know what to say, then like, just say, I'm sorry, or like give someone a hug or offer to help. Right. Because a person I went to high school with had actually lost her sister and then lost her father. And the only person I knew who did grief work was Christina Rasmussen. So I just said, hey, I know this amazing woman who wrote this book, and I had not read the book. I just was like, anything I could possibly do, because you feel like, what can I do? And I noticed in that moment I was making it about me. And I noticed that's a thing, right? People are like, they feel so powerless. It becomes about them. And they're like, can I do anything? Instead of really thinking like, or even just asking like, what do you need? Or even that. So what are some of the things people say and do that are actually not helpful that they might think are? And what actually is helpful?
For sure. So one of the biggest things that people say constantly is they'll say, how are you? And it doesn't matter if they're your best friend or a person you've never met who happens to know who you are in your story. Like, how are you? And you're like, I'm good. Pretty good today. And they're like, no, but how are you? Like the dentist lady scheduling my appointment last Tuesday. I don't know you. I've never met you before in my life. How are you? Pretty good. I just got my teeth checked. All good. No cavities. A+. No, how are you? Are we doing this right here? Like, we're scheduling an appointment,
Yeah.
But that's a constant thing. And in the beginning, particularly when you're fresh in grief, like, you don't even know the answer to that question. You spend all day going, how am I? Am I okay? Am I going crazy? Like, I'm horrible. You don't want to hear about how horrible I am. Can I tell you how horrible I feel?
Yeah.
That's a question that everyone asks.
And even that way that you just said, like the repeat, like, but how are you? Almost like that if you say you're good, it's unfathomable that potentially that is true.
For sure. For sure. And then a lot of people will do the let me know if you need anything. Like the drive-by, like Good Samaritan, like, let me know if you need anything. And like, no one knows what they need and no one's comfortable asking for anything. So like, if you know that someone's husband died yesterday, just show up.
Yeah.
Like if you're in their life in a way that's appropriate for you to show up, and that's part of it. Like, take examination on like, what is your relationship with that person?
Yeah.
Is that someone that you haven't spoken to in 14 years? Like, if that's true, maybe just send a card. Because it's weird for someone you haven't spoken to for 14 years to dive into the intimacy of your grief with you.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know you. We're not friends. Like, I'm not coming to you to share this level of myself with. Like, you're not a source of comfort and confidence right now. Like, this is weird.
Is that different if someone has had a similar experience or like mildly similar, or just no, it's no across the board?
No, I think that's different because a lot of people connected me to other military widows. And I didn't necessarily talk to a lot of them, but just knowing that there were other people, like, oh, I'm not the only person this has ever happened to, gave me like a really useful sense of perspective that you kind of fall down your own rabbit hole and think that your life is the worst thing that has ever happened to everyone in the history of mankind ever. And so knowing that there are other people, in a weird way, it is really useful. And some of those people you do become friends with, and some of those people do help like become mentors and sisters and friends. But initially, in the first days and first weeks, like that, we need our people.
Yeah. Like,
we need our close people to show up with us and come toward us and keep showing up. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with is, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And sometimes it's just, I love you and I'm here for you. And then actually like showing up. And I go back to the birth thing all the time. It's like when someone has a new baby, right? Everyone like brings a casserole and then they're like, call me on their first birthday and we'll have cupcakes, but like that mom in the meantime is like up every night, all night for the next 4 months with a colicky baby and like secretly is dying inside because she's so exhausted and she just needs someone to see her and sit beside her and not save her from it too.
Yeah.
So I think that goes with like the other part of it is I love you and I'm here for you, and actually show up and don't say, call me if you need me. It's like, hey, I'm at the grocery store. I'm going to bring milk and eggs. Is there anything else that you need? Because I'm coming in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to stay. Like, unless you invite me and you need me there, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Like, I think that's a really big point, right? Because, you know, like my boundary alarms go off and I'm like, but what if they don't want you to stop by? But like that part, like, and I'm not going to stay. I'm just going to drop off some stuff that might help. I love that.
Right. And even like when we were still on base before we left, I was very clear from the beginning that I didn't want everyone in my house.
Yeah.
I'm like, here are the 8 people that are allowed in my house, and everyone else, like, please just like, can you create that safe boundary so that I don't have to be on for people?
Yeah.
But we put a box outside the bath. Like, it was like, if you want to leave a letter or drop off a casserole or bring a smoothie or what, like, if you want to bring something to her, like, we will so graciously receive it. Thank you so much. Cause like, I'm not cooking.
Yeah.
And there's all these people who are in my house who are helping me and they need to be fed.
Yeah.
So like, that's so useful. But like, I need to have a boundary where like people aren't in my space and I'm not on.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line between like, what does the person actually need and want? There's loneliness. Like, I don't want to be alone, but like, there is a level of alone that I need too.
Yeah. 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 And I'm sure that is different for everybody.
Yes. And so that's the important thing, is to like pay attention to the person, just like you would if it's a new mom.
Yeah.
If she's wearing a bathrobe and looks like death and is like, her hair is going 19 ways, you should not stay. Like, or you should say, can I hold your baby and you go take a nap? Like, don't ask them to entertain. Don't ask them to be the hostess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just a lot of discernment of who is the person? What is my relationship to the person? And what are they clearly showing me that they need? Because a lot of us, like, we can't even fathom our own needs.
Right.
So it's sort of like when you're showing up with someone in grief, it's almost from the perspective of a doula, of like intuitively sensing, like, what is this person maybe needing right now? Can I make suggestions? Like, you look exhausted. So like, would it feel really good to just maybe take a rest and I'll like man the phones for a while? And like, if anyone stops by, I'll take care of that for you. Like, I'm going to invite you, give you permission to like self-care right now.
Cool.
So a lot of people just need like their basic needs met, like mow their lawn. I don't think anyone will get mad at you for showing up to mow their lawn after they find out their husband dies.
Right.
You know, like, bring their mail in. Like, if you notice there's 19 newspapers on the driveway, pick them up and put them by the door. Like, there's just so many small things that like you have no energy to do to keep life going. And so people who are willing to show up and do that. And then once that passes, it's like, keep showing up. Hey, how about if I bring you coffee on Tuesday?
Yeah.
And then if you seem like you don't want to chat, then I'll just like sit beside you and drink it, or I'll just drop it off and leave. But if you want to chat, like, I'll listen.
Yeah.
And that part of it goes with like, don't fix people. No one needs saving. They just need people to show up beside them.
Yeah. Kimberly Ann Johnson, who was on back in July, we talked a lot about postpartum things, because she has a book coming out later in the year called The Fourth Trimester. And she said that it's just not something I had thought of. It's like, who dumps out the water when the flowers go bad? Like, stuff like that then you're not walking by it feeling shitty every time you see it.
Right. For sure.
Let me change the radar stuff.
There is something about that though, inside a home when someone's passed, that people don't necessarily think about. Because there's been a lot of women who have shared with me that people who unintentionally came into their house and tidied up and changed the last place that their husband put their keys, or took the sheets off the bed that their husband had slept in and that he'll never sleep in again. And so like that smell is gone. Like, there is a level of like sacred responsibility in tending to someone's home in a very conscious way, so that it's tended to in the necessary ways without disturbing the things that might actually be really important to that person.
Yeah. There's so much to consider, but I'm so glad. I love getting into all these nuances, because I know for me, certainly, and probably for people listening, like, that's something I don't know that I would have consciously thought of. Like, the stuff. My mom, so what year is it? Oh my God, it'll be 10 years this coming new year that my grandpa will have been gone. And my mom, ooh, I'll cry just remembering it. My mom she still has this T-shirt of his in a Ziploc bag to keep the smell. And she ambushed me with it one day. She was like, you want to smell pop? She doesn't even give me a second. She just opens the bag. The waft hits me in the face. And I was just like on the floor. And I'm like, you got to give a person a warning. I'm like, don't ever do that to me again. She was being sweet. Like, she actually needed that in that moment. She needed to share like the remembering. And I was like, what the hell?
And that's a hard part for people too. Like when you're trying to process your person, like you keep talking about it and you keep telling the stories, and it's important to have the things, and other people are like, I can't do that. Like that hurts too much to like do that over and over and over. So it's finding the people who are willing to like and able to talk about them in a safe way, and the people who like
a heads up.
Yeah.
Quick break in the show, Wild Ones, to let you know that applications are officially open for Wild Soul Movement teacher training. If you're listening in real time, we're taking applications through September 1st, 2017, and the training begins October 18th, 2017. You can get all the information at wildsoulmovement.com/TT. That's T as in teacher, T as in training. It's been amazing to see what our first graduating class, who completed their certifications this past May, has been able to do so far in just a few short months. We have women teaching one-off classes, running full moon and new moon circles. We have women teaching at other people's retreats as the official Wild Soul Movement teacher. Women incorporating the principles of Wild Soul Movement into their coaching and healing businesses, and women teaching class series as well. We've added a 300-hour teaching certification this year for those who are also interested in joining my staff and coming on to be trained specifically to run Wild Soul Movement weekend workshops, which we're super pumped about. So again, all the information, who the training is for, payment options, all of these things are over at wildsoulmovement.com/TT. So if you've been looking for a way to add more meaning to your work in the world, perhaps to deepen your own embodiment, healing, and transformation, if you are in the Wild Soul Movement virtual program and you want to become more involved and join the teacher training family, head on over there and check it out. Again, the link is wildsoulmovement.com/TT. And now back to the show. So what's your, if you had to sum up, you and I had talked about this many months ago when we had hopped on a call, and I think you had just started writing the book. Maybe it was just before. I think you were considering doing it. But I know there was, and I love this, I love anyone who goes against the grain. I know one of your, I don't even think it was a reservation, but one of the fears was like, I have some stuff to say about grief, and it's kind of different from what's out there. So share that stuff with us, like the philosophy. You've already kind of shared some of it, but what are the things that you were like most afraid would actually trigger people?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a pretty pervasive cultural understanding of how grief works and what happens to you when you're grieving. And one of those that people accept as real is that grief lasts forever. Like on some level, you will always be suffering this grief thing. Like it just has to be that way. And my whole concept that I'm talking about in the book is that grief leaves you forever changed. Like that is real, but it doesn't have to be forever suffering. And there's a lot of things that you can do to move toward your grief and do it in an intentional way, in a ritual way, in a conscious way, to create space for the grief, the pain, which is really just like Marianne Williamson calls it, your psychic immune system activated, right? Yeah. So there's things that you can do to move through that suffering. And eventually what happens is you become the person in the next part of your story. And that grief thing that was once triggering and suffering and painful and agonizing and overwhelming, it just becomes a piece of your story that doesn't necessarily show up that same way. Mm-hmm. So that's really the biggest thing, is I'm just challenging this belief that like you have to be in pain, deeply suffering, even if it's secretly, for the rest of your life. Right. You know, people outweigh grief. Eventually it heals, time heals all. Eventually it'll get easier, it'll get better, but it'll always be there. It doesn't mean forgetting, right? Like you don't forget the story. It's still yours to love and hold and cherish. And it doesn't have to feel painful to remember it.
Right. Because I think that's the part that feels paradoxical. It's like, if I move on, am I dishonoring the person?
Right. Right. And that's a big thing that people face off with. Or I know I'm not, but I'm pretty sure everyone else thinks I am. Right. Right. So a lot of the women that I support are like, I'm making these decisions. People are treating me either like it's a midlife crisis, like I'm doing all these irrational, insane things, when actually I'm just coming home to myself and figuring out who I am this time around in this story, this way. But everyone's applying that lens of grief and insanity that we sort of like buy into to the decisions that we're making.
Did you experience that at all yourself?
Yeah, there were some things that I kind of got the pat on the head for, right? Like I got my first tattoo a few months later and it was like, oh, that's what that is. Like you're just grieving and like that's a little ridiculous. And thinking about where I wanted to live and who I was spending time with and what I was going to do for it. Like everyone really wanted me to just like get a job at a corporate headquarters State Farm here in town. And I'm like, that is not ever the person that I have ever been, nor will I ever be. So like, you can say that's really irresponsible of me, but actually, no, like, this is not a thing that I'm doing. And then of course, like moving into the realm of like dating again was a huge thing that I had to navigate. And the first person that I dated after my husband died, I felt like I was making confessions to people. Like I still love Reed a whole lot, but there's this person that I really like who makes me feel 12 and happy again. And I need your permission to like be allowed to be a human and do that. And can you please still love me anyway?
Yeah. And what was that like?
Terrible.
So were some people, I imagine some people were probably like, yeah, right on. And were some people not supportive? What they say?
Yeah. There were a few people that were very, they were happy for that experience because those are the true friends who like do truly, I want you to be happy. Like no one wants you to suffer forever. So how wonderful that you could be happy. But there were a lot of people who had reservations and a lot of people who weren't ready for me to be okay because they like, I spent a long time grieving like 24 hours a day over the course of time. And for a lot of the other people, particularly the military world, like they're not allowed that freedom. Right. Like you have to go back to work. You have to show up. You have to do your thing. Like, and if you're a man on top of that, you're definitely not allowed to openly grieve. So here are the days of the year that you're allowed to grieve, which is the day he died and maybe his birthday. And the rest of the year, like you have to just sort of compartmentalize it and not go there. And so they weren't ready for me to be okay because they were still in so much pain.
And so I'm sorry, I want to interrupt you because this is really important. And it's cool that you like had the time and the availability and the support to consciously and intentionally go into your grief. And it's good here, I think, that you're drawing the contrast so that some people, they don't actually have that space. And so I think you're really speaking to if someone does have that space or is able to take that space, that you kind of condensed the time frame. It didn't need to be stretched out over, so long because you went into it, like you leaned into it. Am I getting that?
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of the program that I run with the women who I work with is creating the chrysalis. It's called the Ladies of the Chrysalis because part of it is just looking at your time and how are you spending all of your time doing all the things that you think you should be doing to get grief and widowhood right?
Yeah.
Right. And then like, what is it that you actually want to be doing with your time? What do you actually need? You're telling me you're exhausted, but then you're doing all these things that you don't want to be doing and hate doing and everybody needs you to be doing. Like, what can you not be doing? What can you give yourself permission to like be off the hook for and find some space to rest? Because when you're exhausted and you're in that survival mode and you're running away from judgment everywhere you turn, like you can't even feel what you're feeling. Yeah. You're in survival mode and you're overriding any ability to like connect with mind, body, spirit, soul. Like you can't do any of that work when your basic human needs are not met. And so many people go into this place of exhaustion and anxiety because they stay in that traumatized hyper survival state of being. Am I going to be okay? How do I be okay? How do I get my grief right? How do I not have everyone hate me? How do I be safe and taken care of in this story?
Yeah.
So we just like, we go into like overdrive and overperformance and we just stay in that survival mode. And so there isn't ever time to actually like come toward the grief and examine the pain. And like, we're kind of wired to go away from it, culturally, like we're told like, well, don't slow down and you should definitely work out. Like that will all help save you from depression. So like, keep going, go hard and go fast and like, just stay strong. Right? And like, that's not actually helping anyone heal.
Yeah. So, all right. And I asked Sarah this before we got on because I didn't want to like ask an uncomfortable question, but she said, yes, you're in a relationship now. How long have you been with your new partner?
6 months.
And had you dated other people or it was kind of like you hit the jackpot right out of the gates? Like,
no, I dated 2 other people before I found this one.
And so I actually remember the first time I saw a picture on Instagram, my first thought for real was, oh, I wonder what kind of heat she took for this from people. Was it like that? Was it not like that?
This time around it wasn't, because I had already made the confessions with the first guy I dated.
Got it.
Like I had already made the rounds. And so I sort of got that out of my system. And this time around it was like, well, everybody already knows that, to use like the crass words, everybody already knows I'm a bad widow who's dating people.
Oh man.
Right. So I don't have to confess anymore. It's sort of like I already like have that scarlet letter on my forehead that I'm just going to keep living. And so I had already done the work around that, I guess, is the short answer. But yeah, there were some people who weren't totally stoked about it. And also there were some people who felt protective because I got a little hurt in a previous relationship. Mm-hmm. And so like they were not willing to like accept or receive him immediately because they were like, whoa, who's this guy and how's he going to hurt her?
Yeah.
So there was some reservations there.
And does he has kids also?
No, he doesn't have kids.
Oh, okay, cool. I wasn't sure about that because you always post all these amazing pictures and there's so many children in addition to your own sometimes. I'm not sure whose is whose. So what was it like? First of all, I'm so curious. Take the grief, take the widow part out of it. For a woman with 4 children to date, because you know me, I'm always observing people's things. Like, what's it like? Again, I don't even want to portray it as dropping a bomb, but I know that is how it's packaged on, at least on like TV and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Like I have kids. Like, I don't know if you want something. What was that like being like, and by the way, I have 4 children.
Yeah. So I made an online dating profile and found out very quickly how awkward it was to put myself down on paper, right? Like I am a single young mother of 4. And, oh, by the way, I'm a widow. And so, like, I know that makes me totally dateable, right? Because you're not assigning any preconceived notions about what any of those things mean. There's a lot of baggage here. Want to go on a date?
You want to get some drinks sometime?
Yeah. Sounds good, right? But I also felt like it was really important just to be honest up front. Like, I didn't want to, like, waste time on people who were like, you know, if it makes you throw up in your mouth to hear that I'm a widow, we should not hang out. Like, because that's not going away.
Yeah.
And so it was really just naturally unfolding. Like anyone that I moved toward, they were not taken aback by my story. Cool. And when they heard my story, they didn't do the
right.
They didn't have that moment. They were like, oh, wow, what's that like? You know, people who are willing to like see me. Yeah. And I think that was one of the biggest things, and continues to be, is the people who are able to see me and not my story. It's like the cancer thing where they're like, you have cancer. And now everyone just wants to know about your doctor appointments and your chemo and are you losing your hair and how's your appetite?
Yeah.
Like no one talks about the person who is inside the body that has cancer.
Right.
And so that same thing happened to me. I felt like I just became invisible. No one could see me. They could just see like the pathetic widow. Oh my God, how hard is that? They were projecting what they thought my life was going to be like and what theirs would be like if they were in my story.
Yep.
And I just became invisible. You know, I meet new people and then they hear my story and they're like, okay, I mean, I don't know what to do here. So I'm just going to, like, they were just trying to bail out the door before they had to say something wise and useful. So
this is such a good point that I never really put together before. But like, even after my last breakup, which we had written a beautiful post that was like, it was just time. The relationship had run its course. I would get that same question though, but like, how are you really? Actually, I remember one person in particular and me being like, I'm great. Like, yes, I have pain. Yes, I'm working through some shit, but like, it was high time to get the hell out of there. So I'm actually, it's a good time.
So there's a lot of that now for me.
Yeah.
I get people use really interesting language. So it's like, it's so great to see you looking so happy. Or like, you seem so good. It's so great. Like everything just seems really good, with like that unspoken expectation that like they know it's not actually.
Yeah.
But like it seems really good. So that's great. Like we're really happy for you.
Well, you know what's interesting? I think social media culture has something to do with that, because there is a narrative of that, like people just post the highlight reel, even though I know plenty of people who don't, who were just like super real about what's going on. So I think, and because most people, I think people who say things like that, and it probably doesn't apply to everyone, are basing it on only what they observe through social media, not actually interacting with you. So that kind of makes sense to me. I don't know that I would ever say something like that to someone.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's a couple ingredients to comments like that.
Yeah. Well, the other part of it is I can tell someone like the details of why things are good and I'm happy. Like I'm gratitude and like amazing things are happening. I'm opening a yoga studio and I'm starting this amazing coaching business and I'm working with these amazing women who are coming toward their healing. And I wrote a book. Yeah. And they will look at me with tears in their eyes and say, my heart breaks for you every day. And I'm like, you didn't hear anything.
Did you hear anything I just said to you? Oh my God.
So it's just a really interesting thing.
Man, thank you so much for sharing all these things. Cause just hearing, even for people listening, just reminding like, let's all just like think and pause before we speak. Let's just like pay attention to when we are like placing our projections and assumptions on other people. And I'll offer this because this is a question I've come to love. And I learn a lot when I ask people this question. What is it like to be you right now? With no assumption behind it. Just straight curiosity. Like, I'm so curious. Like, what is it like to be you right now? And if anything, I'm assuming good. I'm like, oh my God, that must be so interesting. Like, what is it like?
Right. And sometimes people just want to be asked that question because they haven't even considered that. Yeah. Like they're so holding up all these like boundaries and barriers to like keep people out. Like, oh, what is it like to be right now? Like, it's cool. It's actually pretty good. I've learned so much about so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that question. That's brilliant.
Tell me more about the book. Tell us more about the book.
Yeah. So the book is called Unveiled, A Widow's Guide to Navigating Your Journey in Life After Loss. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot about what we've talked about. It's about awareness and noticing what you notice about yourself and your journey and noticing where you're judging yourself when you think it's other people. I mean, I spent the whole first year like calculating every move that I made. When do I take my ring off? And what does it mean if I do? And what does it mean if I don't? And how many pictures should I have in my house? And if there's too many, like I'm the weirdo who needs to like let go a little bit. But if there's not any, then I'm dishonoring my husband's honor and not teach everything I did. I could apply this like what is good and what is bad.
Yeah.
And what will everyone say about me as a result? But like then my best friend was like, does anyone actually say these things to you? Or is this just you? And I'm like, oh my God, no one has ever actually said any of these things to me. This is all me judging my own journey. So much of it is about bringing women home to themselves and their body. I mean, it's such parallel work to what you're doing. It's totally untaming. Yeah, it's stepping outside of like, what is the good widow's job right now? And then like, what do you need? Who are you? Like, what is the ache of your heart? How do we move toward that? How do we even open to possibility?
Yeah.
And connecting with body wisdom, teaching people how to understand what's a big yes and what's a big no. Mm-hmm. And you are the only one who knows that, right? You don't have to go to the guru. You don't have to ask your mom for permission. You don't have to go to see 17 therapists to make sure you're not insane. Like if you know what's a yes for you, then that is a yes for you.
And it's such a good point too, that so many of the things in our minds we're going, oh, if I do this, what's someone going to what's this person going to think? What's that? For your friend to go, has anyone actually said this? And you're like, oh, wait, no.
I mean, it was
only in my brain every time I've imagined the conversation happening.
I can just absolutely remember that moment. That was a huge change in my path because then I got to consider everything from what do I need? What do I know that I need?
Yeah.
Without considering anyone else's need or opinion or judgment or thought, like what is right for me right now about this choice? And I reserve the right to change my mind if something else is more true later.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what else I wanted to ask you about? Because I remember you had shared this the last time we spoke. I know people had started coming to you before you even started doing these things. Yeah. And I think you said that's kind of what inspired it. You realized that you were like skilled at holding space for this for reasons beyond that you had the experience. I don't even know what the question is, but like, I do. The first time, because I'm sure you remember when someone was like, oh my God, someone's husband died. Can you talk to her?
Yeah.
I want to know, what was that like for you, like leading up to it? Because people have their own experiences, right? And I know some people would be like, no, actually, I'm not up for that. And that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But did you have any times that you said no? Or
I did.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, unfortunately, there were a string of military aviation accidents soon after my late husband's. And one was like 6 months later. It was our same squadron. It was our same group of friends. It was a friend of mine. So everyone was like reactivated into that thing all over again. And so I was kind of in that in my own story, but there was a fiance and he had a child with another woman. And so there were lots of players in that story. And everyone was like, can you please like show up with these people? And I'm like, I can't because I'm so in this one.
Yeah, I'm still. Yeah.
But I can't hold space for them. But there was so much deep empathy in that. As soon as I found out, it was like, I know what those people are feeling right now in this moment. So I knew that there was a big pull on my heart to like somehow be a part of that for people. But actually, the first time that I said a big yes was after a few like temper tantrum no's. I can remember having conversations with my besties like, I don't want to be the crash angel. I don't want to be the person who people call every time someone dies. Like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the stereotypical widow who just talks about death and dying all the time. Like, I want to be able to be the fun girl at the bar who can like make jokes that people want to talk to instead of like, yes, I talk about grief. Like, no one wants to talk to that person. That was my story.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person. I want to be fun and happy. And then I was in San Diego with my best friend, the Susan who you met. And I was in the kitchen of the condo. We were getting ready to leave. And I got a message from a friend of mine who said, I'm sorry to tell you this. I know you don't know this person, but her husband just died. She just found out this morning. And I know you're in San Diego where she lives. Will you go to her house? And I just fell down on my knees and started crying. And I was like, I'm done having temper tantrums. I don't know what this is going to feel like or be like, but this feels the same way when I used to be a doula and someone would say, this woman is about to give birth and she needs someone to walk next to her. Can you show up with her in it? So I'm like, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to go and I'm going to see what happens. And I went, and it was amazing. And it was so beautiful. It feels like a weird thing to say that it was beautiful to go into someone's home less than 24 hours after they found out their husband died and like sit with her and be with her in it. But it was so, there was so much flow and so much like amazing energy happening to just hold space for her and provide some like an ear that could hear her instead of trying to save her. And also just like offer that like tiny bit of hope that she wasn't ready to understand or digest or hear, but she could like put in her pocket for like the next time when she could actually remember that thing that I said. And from that point on, it was just like a no-brainer. I knew that this was gonna become something. And so I took on a few clients who just connected with me that same way. And then the book became a thing. And now I'm running a program for women, and we're doing retreats together and just having all kinds of amazing transformation because it feels important to be the person who I was looking for in my story, right? They always talk about like become the person that you needed inside your storm. And so here I am being the person who I was looking for, Googling for, like, where do you go to find inspirational stories? Where do you go to find someone who's not just going to treat you like a sickness? Where do you go who's not going to just give you another stress management course?
Right.
Like,
yeah. Do you ever feel pissed off about that? I get a little pissed off about that sometimes, like being the person. I'm like, sorry, y'all, but this is the truth. Sometimes I'm like, they have me. Who did I have?
Yeah.
Not like, and not even for the past, but even sometimes now it's like, I want that one, but this is also a projection of like this idea. Like, this is really funny actually today that we're doing this interview this morning. I have actually a lot of things. I have more things than usual to do. I'm like, I always talk about how I love to like not be very busy, but I'm like pretty busy for the next 2 weeks. And so I was talking to Lisa Lister, who's been on the podcast before this morning, just over Messenger. And she had posted something about the movie Moana that I've been wanting to watch. And I've been like, for some reason, not been able to watch Moana yet, right? You know when that is happening, right? When there's a book, when there's a movie, when there's something that you're so drawn towards and you're just like, not yet. And so this morning when I'm sitting there with like a longer than usual to-do list, Lisa's like, you should scrap your day and watch it. And I'm like, I'm gonna. So I watched Moana this morning and I freaking cried, like cried. Oh my God. I had like 4. There was one point I pressed pause on the movie. I stuck my face in the pillow and I did like the scream. You know, like when you feel, I don't know where other people feel this, but for me, it's like between my heart and my solar plexus. It's like that bridge space between my solar plexus and my heart. And I'm like, if I don't scream, I don't know what's going to happen. And I just wailed into that pillow. And then I was like, oh, and then there's like that beautiful exhaustion after a good cry. That's like when a storm stops and the sun starts to come back out and you're like, damn, that was the right choice for me this morning.
For sure.
But I brought that up. I went on a tangent about freaking Moana and I went off on that, but there was a reason I was bringing it up and now I'm losing it. I do this every once in a while. What were we saying before I told you?
You were so busy. You were talking about you're busier than normal. You're so busy. What was before that?
What were you saying right before that though? See, it happens sometimes, you guys.
I don't know. All I can think about is Moana now.
Moana. It was the grandmother. This is what it is.
Yeah.
That's what was having me cry.
You were like, I'm pissed off because we're.
So those of you who have seen Moana, she has this epic grandma who even comes back and let me not spoil anything. Nothing happened in case you haven't seen it. Sorry.
Right.
But I was
nothing
just like
happened.
crying because like. And you know, I had a grandma pass away last year. I have a grandma, but like it's different. Like that wisdom keeper, that like
the
medicine
way shower
woman. Yes. Like that's something I've always wanted. And I know in a lot of ways, like that's what I'm here to be and do for other people, which I love doing. And sometimes I'm like, but where's mine? But then I look around and realize I have like tons of them. It's not like it's not like an old crone grandma. And I want it to be like an old crone grandma.
For sure. I actually had that. It was my first doula that I hired. She was literally the person who like opened the portal into this whole chain. Like my life went from here to like 180 degrees the opposite direction because of what she showed me about being pregnant, about birthing, about being a woman, about being a sister, about being power, about feminine divine. Like she just opened the portal of a whole new way of existing in a human female body for me that I didn't know was even a real thing.
So amazing. So your book is on Amazon, yeah?
Yes, it's on Amazon.
Grief Unveiled. Your website, what's your website?
It's sarahnannen.com, or you can go to griefunveiled.com, which is way easier to spell. There's a lot less N's.
Yeah. And actually, like, we'll put all this in the show notes. And if I'm looking at the calendar, you're episode number 184. So anyone listening who go to untameyourself.com/episode -184, and you can find Sarah's book. You can find what she's all about. I'm so glad. So it was like many, many months ago, and I was like, send me an email when the book comes out, and we'll have you on, and we'll talk about this. So I'm super pumped. There's probably like so many more things I could ask you, but you will have to have you back. And I'm so curious to see how this evolves, like retreats and doing this work with women and using grief as the portal, because that's what it is.
It is. It's the same work you're doing and so many other people are doing, is just helping people find their way home to themselves.
Because we freaking need it. Because we freaking live in a culture where it's like you spend the first 25 to 45 years of your life, depending on your situation. Like if you have found your way to this podcast, likely you spent however many decades getting farther and farther away from yourself, and sometimes with like little glimmers along the way. And then it takes, unfortunately, for some of us, these like massive things to happen to be like, that's who I really am. So we just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, you are amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story and getting personal with us and allowing us into the intimacy of the ever-evolving experience with you. Again, for everyone listening, untameyourself.com/episode -184 if you want to hear more from Sarah. If you have your own story, so this is one of those episodes where your stuff is probably coming up. If you have anything around this or you know someone, so let us know what you thought. And as always, we don't need you to agree with us. Whatever's coming up for you, I want to hear it. So let us know. Absolutely. Sarah, thank you. Everyone else, we'll see you later.
Bye.
One day I found a lump on my neck and I went to the doctor and had it tested, and I was really fearful. And then the doctor diagnosed it as stage 2 lymphoma. And my friend was still sick at that time. But when I received the diagnosis, one of the first thoughts in my mind was, now I get to take care of myself.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like the cancer had given me permission to now do the stuff I needed to do for me. And so one of my messages to my listeners or my audience is you don't need an illness to give yourself permission to take care of yourself. You really don't.